Um, Welcome, everyone. Welcome to AI Unleashed, exploring the revolution reshaping industries. I'm your host, Ed Correa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're very happy to be here. Um, Click the button, Ed. There we go. First, before we begin, all registrants to this webinar will be sent a recording after the event. It is being recorded, so you'll get that copy later. Second, while all attendees are muted and in listen-only mode, we invite you to submit your questions in the chat as we go along. If it's pertinent to the current discussion and we can squeeze it in, we'll answer your question as we go along. Otherwise, we'll do it in the Q&A at the end. Third, following this webinar, you'll receive an email survey so you can share your thoughts about this presentation. Helps us get better and better as we do these. So please do help us improve our processes. And away we go. So again, I'm your host, Ed Correa. I've been working in computers for the last 45 years. Yes, I started in '78. I've personally seen computers go from the punch card to the cloud. It's been a heck of a journey. I'm the founder and CEO of Sagesa Technologies. We are a 23-and-a-half-year managed services company. In the industry, we actually call ourselves an MSSP plus, which means we're trying to make the journey from just managed services to being a managed security services provider. We cater to risk-averse, professionally run businesses. And the reason I say that is our clients have confidential data, they recognize that they have it, and they want to do something to protect it. Some are regulated by industry controls, others aren't. They just want to maximize their security, and that's why we work well with those businesses. But our passion is really mitigating the risks of security breaches, business interruptions, or compliance failures. Today, I'm joined by my guests. First is Jason Short of ConnectWise. He's VP of Products. As a Vice President of Product for ConnectWise, Jason's responsibility include refining and expanding the extensive suite, and as a ConnectWise partner, it is a very extensive suite of products, ensuring they adapt and cater to the evolving demands of the IT industry. And being in this industry, I feel like I'm on a treadmill. It is just, you're running full out all the time. Kyle Jackson of ConnectWise Labs is their innovation program director. As director of that program, Kyle looks outside the box to solve new problems or old problems in a new way. ConnectWise Labs gets to play with all the new shiny toys, and he kind of knows which way the wind is going to blow before it blows. So with that, a little bit about our agenda. So I roughed this out. We have many more questions than just the items here, but we're going to try and walk you through the ideas of what is AI, how does it work, how is it being used today, all the way down to the concerns for AI and how to mitigate those risks. And when I say risks of AI, there's bad guys leveraging AI to attack companies, but there's also fear, uncertainty, and doubt around AI. So we're going to try and put your mind at rest on this and at least give you a 101 level education. And with that, Kyle, I think you're welcome to bring up your slides if you want them, or do they come up a little bit later?
Yeah, go ahead, and if you don't mind, stop sharing, I'll kick off and we'll just have them.
There we go.
Perfect. Well, Ed, let me start by saying thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and your team, and more importantly, you trusting us with your customers and your prospects. The reality is for our company here, for Jason and I at ConnectWise, we we work with a lot of IT companies like yours, right, across the globe. And we don't get a whole lot of opportunity to engage in one-on-one discussion with you and your customers. It's not our business, so, supporting your end customers. That's your business. But we appreciate that opportunity, and glad we could be here to kind of share some insights. So I'll start here in just a moment, but I want to give my colleague here, Jason, a moment to say pass his things along as well. So go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much for having us today. And while we're going to talk a lot about AI, and we may use examples of how we're utilizing AI with our partners, we're going to try as much as possible to talk about AI in general and its applicability as a generic tool across any industry.
Okay.
So
Well,
with that being said, Ed, I am sharing out my screen. I'll just start right here, right now. And the question is, why? Right. And you should be able to see my screen, right?
I can, yes.
Okay, perfect. So the question is, why? Why is AI relevant? And this is a quick little diagram of what we call the infinite edge here at ConnectWise. And the reality is the old days of managing an environment from your perspective as an IT professional, it used to be that there was an outside edge, right? I was responsible for what happened inside the four walls of this box of a building, and then that made it so much easier to manage. Man, if we could go back to those days, great. And then enter the cloud, and all the benefits of the cloud are great, but there's also this downside: is it adds to complexity. So there's a lot of moving pieces now with keeping up with what you're responsible for your client's security and their safety, and that complexity just adds to the amount of time and effort that's going in. So how do we as technology companies or technologists as a whole leverage the capabilities of technology in a way to help us wrangle all of this in? And I think that's going to get us to your first question,
What's
which is,
artificial intelligence?
what is artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence, from a framework perspective, is really all about a machine's ability to mimic human intelligence, just as it sounds. And what it actually is a whole nother conversation and story. There's a dissertation to be had about what it actually is, and to be fair, there's multiple dissertations to be given about what AI actually is and represents. But there are a couple of different layers of this artificial intelligence that that you might hear, and these are some of the terms that you might hear. So Jason, if you don't mind, I'm gonna let you walk through some of this slide, and I'll catch up on the next one.
Sure. I'm going to start really at the very bottom, that teeny little circle called LLM, because that is the component of AI that really has gotten the most amount of press since beginning of the year, just before the end of the last year, with the release of ChatGPT. And that's something called a large language model. And the best way to describe that for people who kind of are used to texting on their phone, if you remember a couple of years ago, both Apple and Android introduced their suggested next word. So if you're texting out, it might give you what that thinks, or what your phone thinks should be the next word. And then lots of people would have fun, and they keep on hitting the middle one and see what kind of sentence it would build out. But that's essentially what those large language models and ChatGPT are. They're that on steroids, which is you put in some prompts, you give it some initial starting points, and then it will kind of predict out what that answer would be. And sometimes they're very effective because they pull from a universe of knowledge, and sometimes they can be a little bit incorrect. And we'll kind of talk about how you mitigate some of those things with human in the middle, human in the loop type controls. But that's really that is what's getting all the press today. And that's what people are calling AI, is really that piece called the large language model, which is predictive text. There's a lot of really great use cases for that. Some people are we are using that internally for script generation. So building out PowerShell scripts, saying, here's a script that I want to generate. This is what I want it to do. And that large language model looks at building out that script, or will build out that script to meet those needs. Other people might use that for writing blogs or writing email responses. So there's a lot of great uses for that piece. But all of that is a subset of something called deep learning. All of that prediction really comes from a lot of learning, which is then itself a sub of something called machine learning, which I think most people are more familiar with as machine learning. It's been around for a very long time. But that is is enabling that deep learning, which is then further enabling the large language models. Machine learning has been around for a very long time. And I think a really great example of machine learning is all of the predictions of whether or not that's a good or bad credit card transaction. So going back well over 20 years, every credit card transaction would be analyzed. Does this meet the pattern that Kyle has in buying guitars? It definitely does. He buys a lot of guitars. That is a great transaction. We'll let that transaction come through. But that's machine learning. Machine learning has been around for a very long time. It's a part of a lot of business intelligence tools and reporting tools. It's been anywhere where you have mass amounts of data and you're looking for patterns, whether you're defining those patterns to identify, or you're trying to find something that is inside or outside some sort of control limit for those patterns.
So that's and you said patterns. So that, to me, that means like pattern matching, very much like when they're giving us one of those tests to see if we're human, and they say click on all the fire hydrants. They train those machines by saying that's a fire hydrant, that's a fire hydrant, that's a fire hydrant. We've had pattern matching for a while.
We have. And actually, a funny thing about those tests, if you ever wonder why it says click on all the bicycles, and you click on all the bicycles and then it gives you another set, like click on the mountains. Usually what it's doing is it's using you to train its engine to detect all of those. So usually every time you get 2 of those, it's not because you did something incorrect. It says, I know you're a human, please help me train this next set. So if you ever get annoyed at getting 2 of them, it's because you were doing their job of distinguishing patterns within pictures.
And the check is in the mail.
Yeah. Interesting enough, Jason, you don't know this, but my wife actually called the bank and had them add guitars now as a fraud purchase. So I can't buy anymore.
That was very smart of her.
Yeah.
You have to do with cash on the black market.
That's right.
So yeah, at a high level, that's really AI is a lot of different technologies that have been around for a very long time. But the large language models, that very small section is really the new thing that is making all the rage, because there's so many places for you to utilize it in almost any business and almost any industry.
I love naming conventions of products. Like I find it interesting sometimes what they'll name a technology or what they'll name a product. The change that we're talking about that enabled large language models is referred to as transformer. And if you just think of how a transformer molds into something and builds into something else, that's essentially what's happening. What Jason just described is, and I would argue that it's not real intelligence that we're seeing. It feels real. It's not real intelligence. It's almost mimicked intelligence, but it's got so much information. It's got such a large swath of data that it might be smarter than me as far as its ability to grab and use or bring back data as far as that goes.
Well, that kind of goes back to like the Turing test, where when a machine can make itself indistinguishable from a human, it's passed the test. And it seems that a lot of people are interacting with AI and they're swearing that it's sentient. It's well programmed.
What we're playing with, and I say we as consumers, right? What's available to the general market today, let's call ChatGPT, is not sentient by any stretch of the imagination, but it's so good that it feels like it understands. Right?
Don't tell the news organizations, because they have articles running all the time. It told me to divorce my wife. And
yeah. Well, it's here's the reality. You've heard the term garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
With data.
Yeah.
The reality is there's so much data. The probability of the right result or the result that you got was the highest probability. And it's all just dials in the background being turned, the right algorithm being applied in a higher percentage versus the next one that give me the result that I end up getting. which leads us to some of the next things here on the slide. Distinguish real quick, and I think you know this slide.
My Star Trek uniform's a different color.
It is, but we've had AI in our lives for quite some time, and I dare not even say it because she's in the room. But if I said, "Hey, A name AI assistant," she would start talking. Or "Hey, S name," right? She would start talking. We've had these components. Heck, Microsoft just this week, there's a slight reemergence of Clippy, right? That comes up in the right corner of your screen. So we've had this, and Jason talked about, the predictive and suggestive text. This is still narrow focused. What we've had and what we're using today, even with ChatGPT, is what we refer to as artificial narrow intelligence. It's not super or the general intelligence that one would refer to as would be almost truly sentient. I use the semblance of Ed as Data from Star Trek to represent a symbiont being here. But that artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, when we get to that demarcation line is that it can actually act as a human, or it will trick you completely. And I will suggest that maybe we're pretty close, or at least this is why it feels like it might be sentient. So last year, when ChatGPT, when OpenAI released 3.5, before that, the version 3 of their product, it passed the theory of mind test, which I'll send you. Happy to share with your audience what these questions are. They're quite comical almost, but the questions are really about how can I read through text and understand what your sentiment is or what your feelings are about something that you're saying. That is a learned skill that we get through time. And if you don't believe me, I'll enter as exhibit 1 my 4-year-old, who is very literal about what he says and his understanding of things. He doesn't understand that we were joking when we said, "Oh yeah, that'll be the day." What'll be the day, Daddy? He doesn't get it. So ChatGPT, or OpenAI's model, in 2022 had the theory of mind intelligence of about a 7-year-old. At 3.5 is about a 9-year-old. Well, that was at 90% of theory of mind tasks. Well, 4.0, they didn't give it an age equivalent, but it passed 95%, not 90. So it's probably closer to a 10, 11, or 12-year-old. My 12-year-old is sarcastic like you wouldn't believe and understands all of the jokes that I drop. So it's just the appearance of sentience is because it's just gotten so good at understanding subtext that we haven't, which is just fascinating to me. Ed, can you imagine a day like it? We're almost at the time where it feels like Jetsons, or where the future is catching up with even Star Trek, where I can just communicate with an AI and get a whole lot of information. So it is truly a fascinating thing with how all this is coming together. This is a quick example of what that transformer component looks like. It literally is just, hey, I have these pieces. I have this piece of information that you've given me in a prompt, and in that I am I'm using all of this to give me the next probable answer and the next probable word. And what's great about this is when they realized that it worked with language, they kind of got a bonus that they weren't expecting with this transformer technology. It also works with images, because images are just, what's the next pixel? What's the probability of the next pixel? What's the probability of the next pixel? So we get to the generative imaging side of things, which is all the fun stuff with the new generative AI is bringing to the table. I could create a picture of you, Ed, from a picture of you out at the ocean, sunbathing with the president. And it looks real because it knows all of those pieces and how to put each pixel in the next place.
I think I'd prefer an actress over the president.
Either way, I don't know. That was the first thing that came to mind. I'm not as creative as ChatGPT. So it really is fascinating what this what this new technology is allowing us to do, and but the fundamentals of it are elementary. It's just, what's the next probable thing? What's the next probable thing? So we get language, we get images, we get music, we get coding for development. Anything that is predictable enough from a data stack perspective that you could say, what's the next thing? Oh, I'll pause here and give you a chance to interject and maybe ask a couple questions.
I love the explanations, because I've been following AI for a while, but you're clearing up a number of questions that I have. Why is Chat GPT everything everybody talks about? It's become the Kleenex of the world. I mean, there are so many other products out there. Frankly, I like using Bard a lot. Could you maybe talk about some of the competing platforms?
Jason, I'll let you do it.
Yeah, there are two. Bard is a good one, which is Google's primary attack. That used to be called something a little differently, but they renamed it Bard. One of the other big conglomerates of a lot of these tools is something called Hugging Face, which is also a hilarious name. But Hugging Face has a lot of sub tools that you can use as an individual subset. One of the reasons why ChatGPT itself became so prominent is just because it was so easy for anybody to put in a prompt and see that response out. It didn't take a lot of effort. So Hugging Face, again, has been around for a few years. They have a bunch of individual tools, but to utilize that, you're going to have to stand up an environment, load one of those tools, feed it a data set, then start asking it questions. It can do great things, but you can't just go to a website and put in a prompt like, write me a poem for Valentine's Day. And then here's some specifics, and have it write a poem. And that's one of the reasons why it took off compared to some of the others. And then compared to something like Bard, it's a little bit of, they were just first to the market. They had all the press. They also, I think this is has a little bit to do with it. They looked independent. Now, Microsoft has a very big investment in OpenAI, but it didn't seem like it was coming from Facebook, which has a strong AI program that they've been working towards, or Google. It looked a little bit more independent to the general public. Now, there's a lot of people who have backed OpenAI. But I think that also has something to do with it. It looked like a new kid on the block, and there's that little bit of newness combined with the ease of use of anybody just going, signing up, putting in a prompt, is why it really took off and kind of became as you said, the overall brand name, the Kleenex brand name for chat. I mean, people hardly even say GPT; they just say, "I put this in chat and got XYZ result out." It's really kind of becoming it's almost its own verb. But there are several models, and those models do really well for different situations. What chat specifically does well is it's been trained with a very generic data set, and they keep trying to update and capture a little bit more recent data, but in general, it's trained on everything that's sitting in Reddit. So all of those comments and opinions and why something is the way it is, all of that type of content that sits in Reddit is now part of its trained database. It's trained on the tech space. It's trained on GitHub and how code is written, which gives it a lot of examples of how to do things.
But very much like what said earlier, garbage in, garbage out. So it's reading all this stuff, and as long as people posted things that were correct, it's got great content. But if people are posting things that are highly biased, it's got those built into it too.
That's exactly it. And as we kind of talk about some of the other follow-on questions, like the risks associated with AI, it can be really a terrific time-saving tool to get started with things, but I don't think that it is in the best interest of any business to utilize any output from AI without going through what's called human in the loop is the common term, without going through another set of eyes to review it, to check it and send it out. So when we, in our tool set in ConnectWise, we have a couple of tools that have embedded the ability inside our tool to say, I want to write a script that does something. It does a great documentation of what that script is, but it requires somebody to look through and test that script before it gets sent out to devices, because it just needs that human in the loop. Same thing with marketing. It would be terrible to have it create a blog without you reading through it and really it just because it was written by somebody else or something else doesn't mean you don't have responsibility to ensure that it's correct before you use it.
Absolutely.
Great
Certainly
time saving.
Yeah,
but
if you hired a summer intern and said, hey, I want you to create this stuff, you'd check it before it went out.
absolutely.
Well, and to be fair, you'd also have to train the summer intern
Yes.
to understand what they're even talking about, right? No, to
Great
even
point.
get close to the right message or output that you were looking for. No.
Interesting.
Yeah, the risk conversation is a really interesting one, because there are some opportunities there for, like any technology, but to be fair, anything to be used bad, right? A hammer is a great tool, but it's also a pretty scary thing in the hands of somebody who wants to do harm with it.
Sure.
Right?
And I understand that hackers or and other bad actors are leveraging this to create new forms of scams and attacks, and they're doing that. But one that I think our audience might be most interested in is the issue of privacy, where anything I put into a query becomes part of that system for future use. And can you talk a little bit about the privacy? How are companies going to protect the data that they want the AI to chew on and spit out something useful, but they don't necessarily want it going beyond them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's several different answers to that. But first, I want to start with a kind of a cautionary tale. There's a company that is somewhat infamous for the way that they run their business. They are anti-PowerPoint, and so the way they do that is they make everybody write a memo, and then at the beginning of every meeting, everybody sits down, they spend 5 minutes, they read that memo. That memo is really there to enforce somebody to kind of think through all the things and communicate with the issues, and then they talk about whatever the subject of the memo is. Nobody likes writing memos. So they would go into chat and say, here's the bullet points, please write this out. And they were essentially feeding chat with all of their corporate strategy.
Oh.
And in order to save time, because they were doing it into the public chat or chat GPT. And so then those answers started coming back to other people when they would start asking similar things. So that, I mean, I think it's a really good example of how an innocent use case of, I really don't want to write these bullet points out into a paragraph form, please write it for me, can really turn into something else. And so
maybe I'm a pharmaceutical, and I've got this new IP, intellectual property, and I upload a bunch of stuff to the AI, and I say, I need you to formulate this for a special presentation. I come up XYZ. That intellectual property is now out of your control. It's no longer secret. It's out there in the world.
That's exactly it. So just following that, if you were to write all that up and say, please write out the patent application for me. Here's all the details. Write the actual contents of the patent. You've now lost your sole control over that. And so for our, in order to combat this, there's a couple of things that you can do. And what we do for our managed service provider partners is we've created, and this is something I recommend across the board, is we've created our own instance of OpenAI. It is a ConnectWise specific instance of OpenAI, so that when our MSP partners are either writing in queries to build out scripts or to build responses or kind of KB type articles or so across our various products, we can control that data never leaves the ConnectWise piece. It never goes out and publicly trains the public version of ChatGPT. Secondly, we can control whether or not it even trains our local instance. And this is, I think, where a lot of the weight back and forth is important. Is we want to have an instance that works really well for MSPs, which means we have to train it to a point where it's, because that is our partner base or MSPs, we want to make sure that our instance of OpenAI is really geared towards giving our MSPs the best information. To do that, we need to continue to train it. And so we, like a couple of companies out there, have written an AI responsibility statement that really talks about how we address privacy, how we address data leakage, some of those governance, some of those pieces. And likewise, I really encourage any one of your clients or partners to also likewise ensure that when they're using software vendors that are building out tools that integrate with AI, that they're not just using the public version of AI, and they themselves have thought through what is it to be responsible use of AI, because it's very easy for that to go off the rails with good intentions. I mean, none of those things are done with bad intentions, but they can be, unfortunately, have bad consequences, like the memo example from earlier.
Excellent. What's the next slide we've got? So I'm asking questions that kind of fit.
Yeah. So this just breaks down, let's say, the capabilities, and I'll just jump through the slide to get to the end. Really, the different capabilities of what AI can deliver. Like it's, or at least the generative large language model, what they refer to as golems, actually. So text generation is great. Text classification, some kind of validation that the sentiment of this information is fantastic. It does a great job of that. Here's a large amount of data. What can I learn from this data? It's really good at that. Again, you've got to go back to the privacy conversation, because if you're feeding in a large amount of data, what's in there? Hey, be careful we don't have any PII, any personal identifiable information in there. But still, it's really good at that. So in the right uses, it really will shorten the cycles for using data. Machine translation, which is the ability to, for it to really understand what an application or what's happening on web pages or documents, lots of sums of data. Automated reasoning, which is more along the lines of like, all right, I have this application, and I'm using it to drive a specific output, in this example, like customer service or risk analysis. Then code generation. Code is just another language. If you think about it, again, it's just a bunch of syntax that allows me to build some desired outcome, which is the same thing as any form of communication required. And then knowledge representation. Hey, I know something about all of this. How do I make it visually understood? How do I build a graph or help somebody visually understand what this? So these are things that it's really good at. And what we've come to assess at this point in time is the generative stuff is fantastic. It's great at getting me started. I wouldn't exactly take something directly out of generative creation and use it, just like Jason suggested earlier, human in the middle, right? We're human in the loop. But what I would feel good about is the summarization side of it, its ability to understand what's happening. So I, as a product manager for a software company, would have no problems building a product that had a direct output for summarize this information or help me understand something here. Because the odds are, if I've built the prompt well, and we'll get to that in just a moment, if I've told it how to give me information well, it's going to do that. It doesn't know how to do that poorly, but it's all about giving it the right instructions. And
so
here's
a really good question that just came in. How does one check whether the AI's output is correct? Especially in an area that you may not know a lot about.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, in the same way that you do any quality control, at first, it's verify everything, right? And that's the stage where we are with AI. Quite frankly, we're not allowed to build. We have a partnership with OpenAI through Microsoft. We're not allowed to build anything legally that delivers a direct outcome. And that's less in answering your question and more in helping you understand like where Microsoft is from a legal risk perspective on how they trust it at this point. So I think as the evolution continues and it gets better, and once you've validated, through the appropriate quality checks, hey, this actually is good, and you can start to trust it, then we'll get to a place eventually as it evolves where I'm going to be okay with it delivering some outcome. But for now, it's all about validation. So the answer to that is unfortunately the hard way, which you're still going to save time because you didn't start from 0, you started from 40% or maybe 60%, but you're going to have to validate, hey, does this look right? Does it read right?
Let's go one more extension. So hallucination. We're hearing lots of either erroneous or hallucinated data being put in there. Why does that occur?
When we go back to the transformer model of how it actually works, if you understand that, then you understand that the hallucination, like it has been trained to give an answer. It's not going to tell you, I don't know. It doesn't understand. Again, this is where we get to the mimicked intelligence. It doesn't understand that it's okay to say, I don't know, right? Because it has so much information. It's all about probability and math at that point. So that hallucination isn't that it's trying to give you a false answer or just trying to give you an answer in the way that we as humans communicate. My 10-year-old is just going to tell you what she thinks the answer is, even though she knows she doesn't know the answer. That's kind of what's happening with hallucination. It's giving you what the next probable answer might be because it didn't have a high enough percentage answer to give you, or information to give you the right answer.
And yet, if we're serving customers internally or externally, it's our responsibility to verify and make sure that that is indeed correct.
Yeah. And there's some interesting tricks that you can leverage with AI to have it do some validation. Keep in mind that there are the cost of goods being spent here when you are using this. You're going to be paying for the use of AI. So the more advanced usage that you get, and this is where it's going to come down to like, who do I trust from an AI vendor perspective? Who has the best model? Who has the best training on top of that model? So all of these things, as we continue to evolve, are going to matter. But when it really comes down to some of the tricks are, I'm going to use it to self-validate. I'm going to move to the next slide just to show you some of what I mean here. And it's not a full perfect example of this, but this is an example. Everything in white is what I have asked the query. So the main ask is, hey, give me the following information from a phone conversation. What I then am breaking out. I want it in this format. Hopefully everybody can read it on the screen. Right? Give me the call reason number 2, give me the cause of the incident, right? I want to clearly get this information. Then I wanted to define how I want the information back. So I work for a software company. I want it in JSON, which is just the way that programmers are going to read the language so that I can use this in a program. So, and you see in the define output, hey, make sure fields 1 through 6 are very short. For location, say just the location name. I'm telling it how I want it to format that. And then the last section is just the raw data. So if you clearly define, and what it really comes down to is if you can narrow the focus into a small enough window, then you will only get the information that you asked for. And your percentages of reducing the risk of hallucination go up, and your probability of like really defining down to the details it's extremely helpful in this.
So shorter, less precise queries are going to increase the likelihood of hallucination, but longer, much more precise, more detailed queries will yield more accurate results.
That's spot on. Yeah. The more information you can give it to make variable changes on the algorithm that it's going to apply to wheel down to what the next word is, right? That's what's happening. If I tell my 12-year-old to go get me the screwdriver out of the garage, good luck with whatever she brings back, right? But if I say, hey, go get me the red and black screwdriver on the right side that's flat on the end, I got a better chance of getting what I want, right?
Makes total sense. I want to talk a little bit about consumption of this by the community. So this makes sense for engineers or highly detailed individuals to form their queries, but businesses are going to wrap this in much more approachable interfaces so that more consumers can use it. Can we talk about, the future applications of AI in business?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with this one and hand it over to you, Kyle, because I want to kind of emphasize that question is exactly really where ConnectWise across our peers is leading the way. And as Kyle pointed out, prompt engineering is so important to getting the right output, that's one of the areas that we are really focused on for all of our partners, that we're trying to do all of this hard work behind it so that the person that's sitting in front of our console is just saying, I want a script that will optimize a machine for battery life. And they don't have to understand all of those other pieces. Or I want to write out a set of instructions to help somebody add Outlook to their iPhone, right? We're taking all of that other stuff behind the scenes and doing it for them. So as you're right, a lot of companies are going to need to be able to make this approachable for everyday users, and through some of the things that we've early sent through patents for with ConnectWise, that is one of the areas that we are really focused on, is how do we bring this not just to make it approachable, but to make it more accurate for our partners and coincidentally the way that they help clients around the world.
So I'm hearing that Microsoft is going to be building assistants for the operating system. They're going to be building AI tools into Word, Excel, et cetera, et cetera. Google's racing to do the same thing. How soon are we going to see these?
You're already seeing them, Ed. And I'll answer this question and continue the last question.
Yeah.
With the same answer. The reality is there isn't a software company on the planet, and if I'm wrong in the single digit percentage, who isn't asking the question, how can I add AI into my software?
I know you have a slide where you were talking about the companies that are in AI today.
Yeah, let me skip to that. Well, we might come back to jobs to be done here in a second, but
yeah,
these are AI companies from China. This is just China.
Just China.
These are Swedish AI companies. These are Israeli AI companies. It's so they're so small they couldn't even really get it on one page.
Wow.
But by and large, the US is number one on every AI tracking metric as far as the number of AI companies. So I just gave this as an example to say there's a lot of people chasing this. And through that, I mean, a lot of companies fail. A lot of software companies that were not different from every other business, right? There's a lot of risk in starting a company. So a lot of these companies might not exist eventually, but I can guarantee you that, like us, we're a verticalized focused software vendor. We support IT companies like yours, Ed. We're putting AI in as many places as we can, because the benefit to you as a user is going to make it that much more, make our product that much more valuable to you. Now enter every other verticalized product that your clients may use. There's a decent chance, which I feel strong about even saying in the 90+ percentile, that they're looking at AI and figuring out where are the places where I can start this. So where your end users, where your customers and their or their prospects, or even their customers, are going to see this in two different places. In the products I already use, as I just described. And then there's going to be little bots or little widgets or little things like a chat GPT. They won because they won because they were first, but they built a great user experience that will give me the ability to play with this to enhance my own ability or knowledge or capabilities to solve for whatever problem I'm chasing. Those are the two different places you're going to have it fit, and products I already use, and then some little standalone thing. Eventually within the next couple of years, Ed, you're going to have your own assistant, your own bot that knows everything you do. That, hey, Jarvis, go solve this for me, go do this for me, go. And it already knows the context of Ed and what you needed to do. My kids, right, in school will have the AI go along with them. It will help them along the way as they progress. It will stay with them. It will become a persona that they carry with them. I don't want to say forever, but for a long time, because that's just the evolution of where it's going to go. That may feel way too far in the future for a lot of people to even think about, but we're not that far from. Look at all the badges on this screen, and that's what these people are trying to chase, is how do I get to being a relevant piece in an existing product that you already use, or being a relevant piece to like own helping you be better at life. And that's really what
I feel like I'm standing on an AI beach, and the AI products have been lapping in like little gentle waves.
Yeah.
And on the horizon, I'm seeing a tsunami coming.
Yes.
As a percentage of these companies start to release products.
Yep.
When does that tsunami arrive?
I mean, I think you can see it now. Right. The average software company is in a silent or building stage for somewhere between 12 and 18 months. So, before ChatGPT, the market value estimations for AI were in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Post this, because the adoption happened so fast and the consumers started to recognize the value so quickly, those valuations are now through the roof. Microsoft themselves say that they're going to do 125 billion in AI, in the next couple of years. So there's so much potential. I think we're going to see that in the next couple of years, starting to be realized in practical use cases and applications. But I'm confident as a consumer. I'm gonna pick and choose. I'm going to pick and choose softly. And this is where the beauty of having a technologist like yourself involved in the mix is going to play a critical role in this, because there is risk. There are integration questions and concerns on what data am I giving it? What's it going to do with it? How does that impact my compliance? How does that impact my cyber insurance? And there's a lot of moving pieces here. So having a technologist in the middle is going to continue to be extremely valuable for the average company, because they're not going to be able to sift through it all.
So let me dovetail on that. So some of the reading I've done is predicting that the typical repetitive worker in an office may have their workload reduced as much as 64% in these repetitive tasks. They're going to be leveraging AI tools to get that stuff done. What's going to happen to that worker? Are we giving them new work? Are we cutting their work hours, their work days? What will businesses do as they begin to leverage this as a tool throughout?
So I'll give you my opinion of that, and this is clear. This is really my opinion, and I'll let Kyle do it. I mean, we've seen so many iterations of that over the last few years. Here's a new technology. Is it going to replace this or replace that? And generally, every business owner on this call Their job is to grow their business, not just reduce the cost point. And I think everyone that I've talked to that has really looked seriously at utilizing AI to assist their business has always been around business growth. And if that frees up people to work on additional items to promote business growth, that's their focus. And so I personally, there are some jobs that may change their emphasis here or there. I look at this as just like every other, whether it's been the PC or even something like Outlook and shared calendars, just making it easy for me to find a spot in between Kyle's guitar practices to grab a spot on his calendar. It'll just mean growth more so than shrinking labor.
Even if you were to cut that number in half, even if we're talking about a 30% gain on efficiency,
that's huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And for the foreseeable future, we'll say the next half decade, right? Most AI is going to be adding to capabilities. What we internally refer to as anding, right? It's going to add it, I can do this, I have this person's job and this, it will help them do this. It's not an or.
This or that.
We're not going to replace them. There will be some who see their jobs change dramatically, but that's the same thing with Excel, right? Excel changed how the accounting principles were able to be visualized. So accounting people that changed. I've got a good family friend whose two kids are, one's a CPA and one's an accountant. And they just both graduated, and she's so excited because who doesn't want a kid who works in finance, right? That's great. And going through all this AI stuff, I looked at her and I said, hey, you might want to tell Charles, her youngest, you might want to tell Charles, just pay attention to what's happening with AI, because if anything that is governed by a set of rules and syntax, I mean, it's accounting and CPA. I said, you might want to have them just pay attention. And she was like, oh no, did I just waste my money? I was like, no, your kids are fine. They're gonna be fine. Their jobs aren't going away. In fact, I think they're gonna get easier. They're gonna get better. The capabilities are gonna expand. It just means that there are going to be more companies able to take advantage of things that they haven't been able to in the past, because they haven't been able to afford, maybe an accountant. So now what's going to happen, a higher tier accountant might be able to take on more people, more customers.
But let's talk a little bit about the competitive aspects of being in business.
Yeah.
For years and decades, I've seen businesses that really didn't invest in their computer operations and were not able to compete, at least in my mind, as well against their competitors. This is a whole nother, maybe it's probably an extension of the battle tools, that we have to do. For example, lawyers. Lawyers would do a lot of research. I've got a case, I'm getting ready for a court. I've got to go do research on cases that are similar, look at the decisions on those cases. Now I'm going to imagine that the various software companies for lawyers are going to build this kind of stuff in. You'll do a query, it'll go search against all cases in the US and come up with the relevant cases and the points at which you make your argument. So dramatically decreasing the research portion and allowing that lawyer to work on areas where hopefully they're providing greater value. Those lawyers who don't do that, how will they compete? I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to go full circle, and
Please
we've
do.
got just a couple minutes here, and if I can, I'm going to try to wrap it up here, and you can send me a check later, Ed. The reason why someone like Ed or somebody in his team, or an MSP in general, or even a technology security professional has been telling you not to click on that email or respond to that text message, or to be careful what passwords you use, or all of this cybersecurity hygiene, is because your data is like gold that's been dipped in platinum, that's been infused with unobtainium, which is the valuable stuff from Avatar, which doesn't really exist, but it's really, really expensive, right? Your data is worth so much because it's a unique perspective on whatever discipline you solve for, whatever problem your business is aiming to accomplish. Your data is valuable now. And if we haven't given you a reason to like understand that, it's now because your data means that there's something on the other end that can be trained with your data, or it's an asset that you wouldn't believe. So as a company, you want to protect that, right? It's a valuable thing. Like my business relies on having it in order to continue doing business tomorrow, but it also now could be seen as an asset to grow and become better with AI. So that's one that's important. Two, you need to start thinking about, as a business, when we start talking about the and or the or with your employees, it's not going to be the or, at least not yet. But the and part is going to be hard to figure out. So the exercise that I would send you down the path on, and we'll go back here real fast, and this is just an example that this is called jobs to be done. So forget the fact that, like, hey, I don't want to replace this employee or this role at my company, but I do need to understand, let's call the person in question, the role, Susan's job. I do need to understand what Susan does, right? What jobs to be done. This is how we attack, like, building a product to solve for the specific use case that Susan is doing. If I can build a product that makes Susan's job easier, you might buy it and give me money. That's the whole trade of money for services thing. Well, with AI, it's all about jobs to be done. What jobs are being accomplished throughout your company? And if you can start to break down and understand what those jobs are, then you might find some pretty interesting, unique patterns. And Ed and his team and the others around could help you navigate this. But you might find that Susan and Dave and Jim all do this same similar job to be done with a minor variance. That's ripe for potential automation. That's ripe for the ability to say, hey, look, if I can figure out how to do that, I'm doing a multiplier on the time saving ×3 for these people. So I would charge you that starting to understand what work is actually being accomplished by individuals. Now, don't scare them by saying, hey, what do you do during the day? Because that's going to end up in them thinking, hey, they might be letting me go. But if you can get an understanding and write down and start to track, hey, then you might find some pretty cool opportunities to say, hey, let's automate this function, or let's enhance this with AI. Those are going to be the places where, when you start breaking down the work that's being done, you start to see what where we're going with it. That's how we're going to be able to map. Okay, now I have this AI, Ed, that can solve this thing. Done. And now everybody's more efficient. I'm more profitable. I'm faster. I'm more reliable. I mean, AI is doing incredible things in health science, right? Its ability to predict cancer and that kind of stuff through images is 95% plus effective rate, where the human is like 65%, 70%.
What's the gray emotional jobs? Is that because that would be difficult for an AI?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. Like those, I can't put a framework around the consultant, or not the consultant, but
Therapist.
The therapist. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
I can hear the AI voice saying, I feel your pain. Or
Yes. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very cool. We're coming up on the hour. Are you gentlemen able to stay a little bit longer than the close?
I unfortunately cannot. I have a meeting that I have to run to with
No worries.
ours, but
this has been fantastic. Boy, my education level has exploded. And one of the things I was thinking about AI is how we might lose a lot of workers has had me change my thinking. Micro businesses where you have just one person or a couple people in a business, yeah, they might be happier. I'm going to reduce my workload. But a person like me, where I've got a bunch of employees, I'm trying to scale the business. If they became more efficient, would I want to lay off people? Hell no. I want to scale the business. I want to grow. So would those people's jobs be at risk? No. I want them to be more efficient so we can support more clients.
Yeah.
So I thank you. I hadn't made that revelation before today. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And Ed, I can stick around for a few minutes. So if there are
Okay,
questions.
great. Jason, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me and having me join with your clients. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. You're in good hands with Kyle.
Okay.
Won't have to make up any answers.
Thank you. Kyle, we've still got most of our attendees here, so let's hit some of these questions they had. Let's see. Well, Robert makes the comment that he prefers to use AI in searching for vendor knowledge bases and things like that. And I'm absolutely like that already. I'm using AI probably about a dozen times a day. And as I get more effective with my queries, it's really making me more efficient. I mean, it's not AI when I dictate, but just using that technology, I'm dictating half of my emails now. I'm so much quicker. And as I learn to leverage AI for the queries to get access to knowledge and other information, it's really speeding me up. Any comments?
Yeah. And I mean, I can tell you from my own personal use, like, let me, I'll give you a story of how I have recently used it that I didn't expect. So it's good at understanding information. So I'm sitting down with my 12-year-old who is an avid reader. I mean, she reads probably 200, 300 books a year.
Wow.
And yeah, it's to the point where when I punish my 12-year-old by taking away a book you can't read anymore, it's quite a weird, surreal experience. But so she's a big reader. So we sat down and I'm like showing the kid, my older kids, hey, this is what AI is and let's play around with it. I was like, hey, let's test something. I said, all right, generate the first chapter of a book that brings two stories together. And I chose Ender's Game. Take Andrew Wiggin, take Ender and put him in Hogwarts for his first year at Hogwarts. And it wrote a beautiful story in the first chapter, we'll call it a couple pages but it understood both worlds. And what impressed me was, as a reader myself, there's 12 or so books in the Ender series. Like, I know Andrew Wiggin, I know him as a character. It really understand the nuances of his character in that. We did the same thing with, hey, give me a story where Luke Skywalker and Jean-Luc Picard meet. And it weaved a beautiful story of probable nature for those two universes together. So I think there's more potential here than we give it we give it credit for. We've just got to discover it. We've got to find the use cases. And once you uncover the use case for it, like, hey, the aha moment happens, then I can start to tweak and apply little changes or adjustments to it, which then become really, really useful with how I want to apply that in some other place or some other discipline. Oh,
no, that's very, very well said. Let's see. Here's a good question from a gentleman. Artists and authors seek to wall off their works from use by AI. And do you see a time when tech product vendors will wall off their own knowledge bases from access by AI?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here is the growth and valuation building of these AI companies off the back of knowledges from sources that other companies have carried the weight for and produced. And you see those companies saying, hey, wait a second, you just created this value, $1 billion valuation for your company off of knowledge that I have. Where's my cut? So the wall
example, Reddit,
exactly.
Yeah.
Which they're right to do so.
Yeah.
the walled knowledge is going to be a change for us. The free internet, where everybody posts anything just because they want to, appear smart or have some kind of knowledge base or have some kind of, drive traffic back to my, there's going to be adjustments to that. And that's still being worked out and how that's going to play out. But it is going to change. There's no way it doesn't.
Excellent, excellent. There's another comment here. We've all been through the replacement of bookkeepers by software. All it produced was incredible amount of fraud. Any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you this is, historically where we've been and where we are going, we are dealing with another plane of existence with the technology. So our experience with automating things in the past have been hard-coded workflows that look for very specific things and drive very specific outcomes. What we have now is a capability with AI to identify a broad scope of variable information and then apply knowledge on top of it. So I think there's going to be a difference, a dramatic difference in our past experiences with what we've been sold as AI or automation on that. So
this world of whatever as a service, is relatively new. Telephones were always the example, the cell phones, and now it's percolating through everything. I can't imagine AI from a software vendor being anything other than as a service, because they're constantly updating it. The iterations are going to be unbelievably frequent.
yeah,
This is not something you're going to buy and plunk down money once and think you're covered. You've got to have it as a service.
yeah, you're not going to own it. And to be fair, the amount of time and money it takes to build these foundational models, there's probably only going to be a handful of companies that deliver the true underpinnings of the foundational model, like a ChatGPT. So we're gonna be dealing with the Googles, the Microsofts, the Metas, the larger companies who have spent decades and millions, if not billions of money building all of this in. So yeah, 100% agree. I like Maurice's question here, which kind of talks about that, or at least close to the edge here, is other than the kid getting older, which I love that, how does each iteration of a ChatGPT improve in practical terms? Well, yes, the learning that's happening one by one, but when they moved from 3.5 to 4, it wasn't just 3.5 learned so much that they needed to put a new number on it. So, as a software company, we're constantly improving our products based off of feedback. So there's even if it's little small iterations. I move this button from the left of the screen to the right of the screen because more people, it feels more natural. That's a small thing. So the literal iterative adjustments on the algorithms that are being used or the knowledge that they're feeding it and training it with, those are the practical things that are changing from each version on. And it's not just I taught it or learned it through all of the millions of prompts that we've given it. There's quite a bit more behind the scenes.
So final two questions, and I'm going to try and wrap it up. Don asks, is all AI based on a range of probability rather than certainty? Can it ever know, or is it just predicting the outcomes and responses?
Yeah, respectfully, was it Rob?
That was Don.
Don, the only way that you know something is if your personal experience drove you to understand that if I do X, outcome equals Y, right? And in a controlled X equals Y, I now as a person consume that check, this equals this. If I go tell someone that, Do they know it? Or have they learned through my knowing it? So in essence, to answer your question, yes, it's a probability, but in the same probability that you taught your kid not to touch the stove.
So, yeah.
Unless they've done it, they don't know. Right? It's not something they've learned and practically have understanding of. They've learned it from you. So the same principles here are applied. What we will get at, and look, I'll just put it this way. If Skynet were real from Terminator, and there is fear to be had in the world as it relates to AI, I want to buy a farm and go buy a farm and live on a farm. I'm not kidding you. I want to go buy a farm. I'll walk out of my office some days and my wife will go, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just thinking about the future." Because there's some unknowns to some of this stuff. But what I can say with assurance is that the evolution of these things is going to get better. And up to a point that it hits the fan and it gets bad, it's going to be freaking fantastic. The outcomes that I need to solve for are going to get easier. The jobs to be done are going to be simpler for me. I'll be able to spend less time working to drive the same outcomes and spend more time playing my guitars. Right. So like those things are a reality that we will get to until something happens to make the wheels fall off. And hopefully we get ahead of that. Hopefully we get ahead of that.
Yeah.
But it is all about the probability of, is this right? I don't know. But just like I don't know how to fly a plane, but I feel like I could keep us level for about 10 minutes because I've watched enough.
Sure. Final question. Okay. So all these companies are leveraging AI products. You've got a few manufacturers developing the underlying technology. Other people's are putting wrappers around it and providing it to their industries. Where is the business going to turn for support?
Yeah, the hard part about that is this is emerging technology. So
we don't know yet.
Someone's going to have to own that. And I think the evolution of managed service providers, like yours, being the in-between for the non-technical people, are going to have to solve that gap. Or quite frankly, if it's not you, it'll be some other form of technologist who has to solve that gap, because there are some complexities, and I alluded to some of this before. There are some complexities that this is just going to be, there's just going to be a lot of moving pieces for this. Eventually, it's going to get a lot easier to make it fit. You're going to have AIs communicating with AIs to solve the business problems, but we're nowhere near that. We're decades from that being a reality. So yeah, you're going to have to lean on someone who's going to have to lean into the knowledge and capabilities. And quite frankly, this is just another program that has to authenticate and touch a database. That these are all principles that MSPs and MSSPs already understand.
Excellent. Great place to wrap up. So Kyle, thank you so much. And to our audience who joined us today, thank you so very much. This was one of the best webinars we've done all year. Really enjoyed this. So thank you much.
Take care, everybody.
Okay. Take care, folks. We're going to close it out. Thank you.